Today, I want to talk to you about triangles, specifically the triangle of safety or the triangle of stability. It keeps getting brought up on Facebook groups, people referencing that, and there's clearly a handful of people that haven't taken the time, or they don't understand, or it's just never been explained that the triangle is fundamentally different on a tractor than it is on a forklift. And unfortunately, most of the documentation you're going to find online is going to be forklift related due to OSHA compliance and forklift certification, stuff like that. So when people Google the triangle, they generally find forklift related stuff, and they think, well, my tractor's got a loader and the forklift lifts things, so there's obviously some comparison there. And it is not at all the same. In fact, it is fundamentally the opposite, and it can get you in trouble if you don't know how these machines work. Now, this machine came into my family before I was born. I grew up on it, and I have literally thousands and thousands of hours operating it. We live in pretty hilly country, and I've operated this thing in some pretty sketchy situations, dragging logs and hauling things on the front and hauling things on the back, and there are things that you can do to make this thing incredibly stable on a hill, and there are things that you can do that'll flip it right over on just the slightest hill. And if you don't understand that triangle correctly, it can be devastating, especially on these older machines that don't have a ROPS. So pay attention to that, and let's go check out and see what Google has to say about the triangle. So let's say I just bought my first tractor, and I'm on a Kubota group or a John whatever, a tractor group on Facebook, and somebody says, blah blah blah, stability triangle. I'm like, what is the stability triangle? So I plug that into Google. Well, here it brings up all of this forklift documentation, and all I did was search stability triangle. Well, okay, yeah, this makes sense. All right, so we have a triangle. Well, when we look into this, the stability triangle is explained that anything inside this orange triangle is inherently stable, and anything outside the triangle, especially out here on the forks, is inherently unstable. But here's the problem. On a forklift, your load is right here attached directly to your most stable wheels on a forklift. On a tractor, this is flipped, and your load is carried out here on the very center point of this triangle, which is incredibly unstable. So we're going to go out, we're going to grab a tractor, and we're going to discuss this. All right, so we got our B series. We got to lift it up here in the air. So on a forklift, the solid axle or the front axle over the forks or under the forks is solid attached to the frame of the forklift. Whatever that axle does, the forks do, everything does. On a tractor, that's opposite. You have an equalizer that allows this front axle to follow uneven, contours of the ground or grade or whatever. And that is the sharp point of your triangle. So now with that knowledge, we know that our triangle of safety goes right here, the fulcrum of this front axle, so we can draw a line from right here in the center of the hood, back to this back tire where it contacts the ground, to this back tire where it contacts the ground, back to the center hood. That's our triangle on a tractor. Anything within that triangle is inherently stable. Anything outside of it is unstable. Now, with that said, if we're going to pick up something on the rear of the tractor, that plants the entirety of the weight of everything we're picking up, plus any weight that it lifts off the front, because it's got to have, as you lift something on the back on one end, you have to have that counter effect, right? So we're actually taking weight off the front, and we're putting all of that weight on the rear axle. So we're putting the weight of whatever we pick up, and any weight that we remove from the front axle goes onto this inherently more stable rear axle. The opposite is true up front. You see, when we pick up something with this front loader, and if it's heavy enough, well, and anything you pick up, you have that fulcrum effect. It's right here. The fulcrum effect comes right here in this front axle. So anything you pick up, if you pick up 100 pounds right up here at the front loader, it removes 100 pounds from back here at the tractor. So you're focusing all that weight. You can pick up enough, I've done it plenty of times, where you lift the back axle off the tractor. At that point in time, you know that all of your weight of what you're picking up and the rear tractor, everything was 100% on this front axle. And we already know that front axle does this. If you're on a hillside and you pick it up and then that axle shifts, and you already have this loader in the air, that can get spicy fast. All right, so now I went and grabbed, I don't know, that's like probably 600, 700 pound log. And I picked it up with the front loader just to kind of give you a demonstration. It is mostly off the ground, but it's not quite perfect. You can see it's pretty well balanced. Now there's a lot of weight on the front of this, but not crazy amount. It's only, you know, maybe 600 pounds. But you can see how much that destabilizes the tractor. You can just, look, I can just lift that. Now, you should know, these back tires are full of fluid, and usually I would have something more substantial on the rear of the tractor than I currently do, but I've been moving logs, and that's what I use to drag logs out of the woods with a lot. So I don't always have more weight on the tractor. But you can see how just 500 or 600 pounds, if you're on any steeper of a hill, that thing could just go right over. Now, let's take a look and see what it does in the rear. So now with the log picked up, we are applying all of our weight to the rear axle here. In fact, we are robbing some of the weight from the front of the machine and putting it on the rear axle as well. As we know, the rear axle is the most stable because it is solid attached to the chassis of the tractor. So I can go up here and try to shake it, do whatever I can, and there's just no way. Like last time I was able to dislodge that back tire really easy, and this is, it's planted. And actually, in switching this scene, I drug that log backwards, and just that little bit of dragging with the tires pushing backwards, this left rear tire kept lifting off the ground a little bit. It was a little sketchy. So I think the takeaway here is, if you're on hilly ground and you can carry your load at the rear of the tractor, it's a little safer. When I mow 6 acres here, and a lot of it's really steep. I use a 3-point mounted 72-inch finish mower on the back of this machine, and it is pretty stable. In fact, when I'm just mowing, these loaders come off so easy. Like, it takes less than a minute to take this loader off. Takeaway is, always be mindful of the way you're distributing your load on hills and slopes, and the way the load is transferred to the ground with any machine. Anytime you're on a hill, keep that loader as close to the ground as you can. There are times where I'm on a hill where I'm like super sketched out, and I've got the loader like 2 inches off the ground and my hand on the control. I'm ready to set that loader on the ground. If the back starts to lift up, one of these rear tires starts to lift up, I just press that loader into the ground, and she'll usually settle in really nicely, and you'll save the day. So just always be thinking about the reality of the triangle on a tractor versus a forklift, and how they are fundamentally different. And if you just take that forklift and you look at that, you know, a little bit of documentation and think that applies to your tractor, you will get hurt. So anyway, I hope this helps clear some things up, and you guys be safe out there and enjoy your tractors.